Monday, August 13. Pisidian Antioch, Part 1. From Cyprus, Paul and his companions sailed to Perga in Pamphylia, on the southern coast of modern Turkey. Before they moved on to Pisidian Antioch, Luke reports two significant incidental changes. Paul becomes the leading figure. Up until here, Barnabas also is mentioned first, and Luke stops using Paul's Jewish name, Saul, and starts referring to him only as Paul, as we read in Acts 13:9. This is probably because from now on, Paul finds himself mostly in a Greco-Roman environment. Acts 13:13 records John Mark's going back to Jerusalem. We are not informed in the texts themselves of the reason for John Mark's desertion. Ellen White wrote that, faced with fear and discouraged because of the hardship ahead of them, Mark was intimidated and, losing all courage, refused to go further and returned to Jerusalem. Just that one sentence from the Acts of the Apostles, page 170. God never promised it would be easy. On the contrary, Paul knew from the very beginning that his service for Jesus would involve much suffering, but he learned to rely entirely on God's power, and in that lay the secret of his strength, as he says in 2 Corinthians 4:7-10. Acts chapter 13, verses 16 to 41, contains the first of Paul's sermons recorded in the New Testament. It was not, of course, the first sermon Paul gave, and there is no question that it represents only a brief summary of what he said. The sermon is divided into three main parts. It begins with shared beliefs about God's election of Israel and the kingship of David, as we read in Acts 13, verses 17 to 23. This part is intended to establish a point of contact with his Jewish audience. Next, it presents Jesus as the fulfillment of God's promises of a descendant of David who would bring salvation to Israel in verses 24 to 37. The concluding part is a warning against rejecting the salvation that is offered through Jesus in verses 38 to 41. The climax of the sermon is verses 38 and 39, which enclose the core of Paul's message on justification. Forgiveness and justification are available only through Jesus, not through Moses' law. This passage does not say that the law has been abrogated. It only highlights its inability to perform what the Jews expected it to do, namely justification. Such prerogative rests solely with Jesus Christ. So, to finish today, what does it mean that salvation is only through Jesus? How do you reconcile the necessity to keep God's moral law with the fact that the law is unable to justify?